Hello and welcome to rounds 5 and 6 of the DTM Masters from the famous Norisring street circuit in Nuremberg, Germany. This weekend's 2 races will attract the second largest motor racing crowd in Germany, and it's only the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim which will attract a larger gathering of motor racing enthusiasts. They'll have a treat in store too if the first 4 races were anything to go by. In the opening pair of races at Hockenheim, the Opels and Audis were struggling while Mercedes-Benz were flying. It was sweetness and light for Norbert Haug and the men from Stuttgart, even if Pedro Lamy was in a bit of a spin. In contrast, Bernd Schneider barely put a wheel wrong in his 4-litre CLK Coupe to win the opening round of the brand new championship. But the weather would change for race 2, and with 450 horsepower and no traction control, it was that man Lamy again. Another casualty was Peter Dumbreck, helped on his way by Manuel Reuter, but ahead of them, Schneider was on his way to the checkered flag for the second time. Next stop was Oschersleben for rounds 3 and 4 in scorching sunshine. And this time it was Opel's weekend, with Manuel Reuter heading a 4 Astra train, as Schneider's Mercedes struggled to score points. British drivers Dumbreck, James Thompson and Darren Turner were in the thick of the action, worrying Opel boss Volker Strycek. But he needn't have been too concerned, because through all the fireworks, his man Reuter was heading for the checkered flag. The second race was just as instant-packed, with Reuter again streaking away from the troubles behind. Meanwhile, Bernd Schneider was destruction testing his Mercedes and the tyre walls. Reuter, though, was in a class of his own, making it 2 wins for Opel to match the 2 wins for Mercedes so far. And that means that the honours are even as the teams arrive at Norisring for rounds 5 and 6. So it's Schneider and Reuter on 52 points in first place, and third place Marcel Fassler with 44, Winkelhock in 4th with 37, Scheider in 5th with 32, and Peter Dumbreck in 6th place with 24 points. The famous street circuit here at Norisring is only 1.5 miles long and is often described as the German Monaco. At first sight, the track layout with the 2 straights, the 2 hairpins and 1 S-bend may be rather easy looking, but it's well suited to passing manoeuvres under braking that makes for good touring car racing. As the cars take to the track, it's over to Steve Slater.
And you can't get a better city centre location than this. The Norisring, built around the Stein Tribune Park on the outskirts of the city of Nuremberg. 74,000 spectators packing the grandstands and the Stein Tribune itself. 99,000 people buying tickets for the duration of the weekend, and they call this tyre poker. The final countdown going on with the clouds massing in the skies, and the cars line up on the grid, headed by Joe Winkelhock and Marcel Thiemann. Bernd Schneider, the double winner at Hockenheim, lines up alongside the experienced Klaus Ludwig. Then Stefano Modena and Manuel Reuter, the double winner at Oschersleben. Young chargers Fessler and Jaeger complete row 4, followed by Menzel and Eric Ellery. Then the first of the Audis, Christian Abt with Uwe Alsen alongside him in his Opel Astra. Then it's Pedro Lamy and Michael Bartels, followed by the first of the Brits. Alongside Timo Scheider comes Darren Turner. 2 more Audis, Laurent Aiello and Chris Nissan, France and Denmark, and Peter Dumbreck on his own at the back. And this is a notoriously difficult circuit to drive. You even have to use the pavements on one memorable corner. And it's also very difficult to get the chassis set up because there's no testing here. These are normally public roads around the park. 19 cars on the warm-up lap, heading down one side of the dual carriageway to the Grundig hairpin, and then literally it's a hairpin left at 30 miles an hour to bring you all the way back up the other side. Following Harald Gross, another ex-German touring car driver, driving the safety car. It's the blue and white Mercedes and Marcel Thiemann, but pole position for the rolling start as the pace car pulls off. Joe Winkelhock in the red Opel Astra. All the cars, 4-litre engine capacity, all V8 engines, 450 brake horsepower per car. And a superb start from Joe Winkelhock. Peter Dumbreck right at the back, and one of the Audi's already in trouble across the start-finish line, but it's Joe Winkelhock on the inside. Marcel Thiemann on the outside, smoking his tyres. Klaus Ludwig in 3rd position, keeps a tight line, and that's going to be an advantage. It takes him up alongside the second place man, Marcel Thiemann, but at the head of the pack, Joe Winkelhock, a brilliant start.
A great start by Joe. But you've got to remember that the track conditions are not perfect at the moment. They're not dry. So first out, first lap out, and you're at the front, and you're the first person there, and you've really got to find out what the conditions are like, and you've got a huge pack following you, right on your bumper.
And Winkelhock now ahead of Thiemann, Ludwig third, Schneider fourth, then Manuel Reuter and Stefano Modena in the Opels. But it's Joe Winkelhock having to defend from the very hard-charging duo in the Mercedes-Benz. And it's still Marcel Thiemann from the black car of Klaus Ludwig. And 26-year-old, there you can see just where the damp patches are on the circuit. It's 26-year-old Marcel Thiemann with the two veterans, one each side of him, 38-year-old Joe Winkelhock, 50-year-old Klaus Ludwig, the winningest driver in German touring car racing, a 3 times champion, been racing since the 1970s. Believe me, Klaus Ludwig has lost none of his experience. The car runs a little bit wide though, down at the hairpin, but at the head of the pack, it is still smoking Joe Winkelhock at the head of the field in the Opel Astra. Through the S's and down at the hairpin, trouble there for Peter Dambreck. He's hit Timo Scheider. Chris Nissen in the Audi TT also tied up in that. And just look how close the cars are running the wall. This really is a circuit where there's no margin for error.
True, but there's also a lot of width in this circuit, so it gives the drivers various different options on the lines they take.
And absolutely right on cue, Marcel Thiemann gets his nose alongside out of the Dusenteig hairpin. Around by the park, now down the dual carriageway, absolutely door mirror to door mirror with Joe Winkelhock. And this time Marcel Thiemann's going to have the inside line down for the hairpin. And look at Klaus Ludwig behind, setting himself up down the inside. And Klaus Ludwig trying to squeeze Joe Winkelhock wide. Now they're going to go door handle to door handle. But the next corner is the right-hander, and that will mean Joe Winkelhock has the advantage as they go through the S's at the back of the Stein Tribune. Smoke from the front tyre of Ludwig's car, locks a brake up there, no ABS braking on these cars, and right up over the pavement go the leading cars, but it's Marcel Thiemann now out in front.
It was a great opportunistic move by Ludwig down the inside on the hairpin. Of course, he lost out the next one, but here we see Scheider and Dambreck having their little coming together. That really was just a question of a racing incident. Scheider turned in on Dambreck, who was sort of halfway alongside him, and the end result, 2 cars just canoodling in the barriers.
Chris Nissen tied up in that as well with the Audi. Meanwhile, the battle still goes on. 1, 2 and 3. And it's Marcel Thiemann, the 26-year-old, originally from Hamburg, now from Monaco. Been racing for 3 years for Mercedes-Benz, raced in the International Touring Car Series in its last year, then went on to run in the FIA GT Championship. Very experienced young driver, but right behind him, one of the most experienced touring car, super touring drivers, Smoking Joe Winkelhock. And Smoking Joe gets his nose back onto... Oh, and a huge twitch and a snake there. Marcel Thiemann trying to squeeze the power out of the Mercedes. Gets it sideways. He's damaged the front spoiler, though, on the back of Winkelhock's car. Oh, there goes the debris. Carbon fibre flying up into the air. Klaus Ludwig trying to take a look down the inside. Marcel Thiemann, though, is not going to give him any room. Now, the question is, will that Mercedes in second place still handle? Because it's now missing a bit of its aerodynamics. And Marcel Thiemann there hopping and bouncing over the bumps a little bit, but he's still keeping the pressure on Smoking Joe Winkelhock.
The roles were definitely reversed here because, of course, previously Thiemann had done the same thing on Winkelhock. But here we see Winkelhock coming out of the last corner, getting alongside Thiemann. But, of course, there's only one dry line at the moment, and as Thiemann gets on the par there, the car gets very loose, and he has a huge tank slapper. That's a real heart-stopping moment for him because he was heading straight for the pit barriers, but he managed to save it by just sort of getting control by touching the back of Joe's car and then lost those bit of aerodynamics.
Well, first, second and third now still Winkelhock, Thiemann and Ludwig. And interesting, that big slide that Marcel Thiemann had there, exactly what happened to Peter Dambreck in practice. And that meant he missed the qualifying and had, of course, to start from the back. He didn't have Joe Winkelhock to knock him straight. Now, Joe Winkelhock pushing hard. Marcel Thiemann second place, then Klaus Ludwig. Bernd Schneider moving up very quickly indeed. The Hockenheim winner ahead of Manuel Reuter. The orange car of Eric Ellery. Then Thomas Jäger, Marcel Fessler, Stefano Modena and Uwe Alpsen completing the top 10 runners. And Alpsen really fighting a big battle now with Pedro Lamy. And Lamy closing in. New livery for Pedro Lamy. Red door mirrors on the white Mercedes. The Rosberg run car run by former World Grand Prix champion Keke Rosberg and Pedro Lamy and Uwe Alpsen. Absolutely door handle to door handle down through the bottom hairpin. Now this is the one where it opens up. It's like a large roundabout around the back of the park. A huge road junction through the week. Meanwhile, race leader down at the bottom of the dual carriageway, Joe Winkelhock. And again, right up against the barrier, still followed by Marcel Tiemann and Klaus Ludwig. Now, Will, we can see that debris there flying off Marcel Tiemann's car. The question is, how has it affected his handling?
I doubt it would affect the car too much on a circuit like this because, of course, it's quite a tight circuit. Although the straights are fast, there are no real fast corners, and therefore you don't need the aerodynamic effect as much as you would say on a circuit like Hockenheim.
Well, Hans-Werner Aufrecht, the boss of AMG Mercedes-Benz, well, you wouldn't think by his face he'd got 3 cars in the top 4. But I think he's looking a worried man because Klaus Ludwig going door handle to door handle now with Marcel Tiemann. Gets the run down the inside this time, and the track's still drying out. Tiemann slots into that 3rd place, right into Ludwig's slipstream. Bernd Schneider closing in as well and taking Manuel Reuter with him. So the 2 previous race winners as Manuel Reuter makes his move down at the hairpin and squeezes Bernd Schneider out of that 4th place. It's the Opel now up into 4th and closing in on Marcel Tiemann. And maybe Tiemann has got a handling problem. Maybe he's just been working his tyres a little too hard early in the race, because he now looks as if he can't do anything about Klaus Ludwig ahead of him. Ludwig, of course, in 2nd place. And Joe Winkelhock, we see him there right at the bottom of our screens, already up through the 2nd set of S's. This is the battle, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th places. And Bernd Schneider really now putting the pressure on Klaus Ludwig, because he knows he has that Opel of Manuel Reuter, the Osterschleben double race winner, right behind him. Norbert Haug, the head of motorsports for Mercedes-Benz, also seen on the Formula 1 pit walls, of course, with McLaren. And wheel to wheel, here they come, Opel versus Mercedes. And Marcel Tiemann, maybe he's just pushed a little too hard too early in this race, but it does seem as if the Opels are fighting back.
They seem to be turning a little bit better into the tighter corners and therefore getting a better exit and built more speed. But also, looking at the Mercedes, they're also perhaps not as stable under braking. You saw then when Reuter got past Schneider, the car had a bit of a wobble as he jumped onto the brakes. And here we see actually Reuter doing the same sort of move on Tiemann as he did on Schneider. Nice clean move up the inside into the 1st corner.
And in the background too, you see the orange Opel Astra moving up as well. That's the Frenchman Eric Ellery now up into 6th place, and the Italian driver Stefano Modena has dropped back. He's obviously taken a run up the escape road at one of the hairpins, and Ellery closing in now on Bernd Schneider in his Mercedes-Benz. At the head of the field, it's still Smoking Joe Winkelhock from Klaus Ludwig, the 2 veterans at the head of the field, and maybe you do really need experience here. As we see one driver, well, that's what I would call an unforced error. Marcel Fessler, one of the young chargers, maybe just charging a little too hard in the S's.
He's, of course, been our star in the first 4 races of the championship, but there he obviously just got on the power a bit too soon and just lost the back end.
Well, if there's going to be a battle of the Titans, I reckon these 2 of them at least can qualify quite easily. As we see in the background, Bernd Schneider moving up on Marcel Tiemann as well, but Klaus Ludwig again locks that front wheel into the tight right-hander of the S's, and Manuel Reuter almost pushing him up onto the pavement. This really is brilliant stuff.
And Reuter putting him under masses of pressure, and you almost feel that an overtaking move is on at any moment. And here it comes down the inside of the Dutzendteig, and he brakes a bit too late and loses it. He's lost more than 1 place. In fact, he's lost about 4 places, so that was a big mistake from Reuter.
Reuter rejoining in 6th place. It's Winkelhock back in the lead from Ludwig, Schneider, Tiemann, Ellery, and now Manuel Reuter back down in 6th place, with right on his tail there Stefano Modena, the Italian racing driver, ex-Formula 1, another very hot competitor. Let's have another look at that one.
I think what's happened here, if you look at Ludwig, he's locking up his front tyres, whereas Reuter, on the other hand, almost looks as though he's got too much rear bias. And when it's damp, or certainly wet, you run a lot more rear bias. It looks like his rear brakes snatched on when he jumped on the brakes quite late. So maybe he's got to adjust his bias.
For all of this, and just 28 of the 44 laps currently completed, Joe Winkelhock leads Klaus Ludwig and Bernd Schneider, and we've got another race to come as well. So join us after the break. To Germany, to Nuremberg and to the Norisring, round 5 of the German Touring Car Masters. Head of the field, Joe Winkelhock leads Klaus Ludwig, then Bernd Schneider, but a tremendous battle with Eric Ellery, the Frenchman, piling the pressure on Marcel Tiemann. Marcel Tiemann in the Mercedes-Benz dropping, oh, and he's dropped all the way back now, spins out at the Dutzendteig hairpin and just about managed to regurgitate bitter blow to the young man who was leading this race at the start. He has gone from hero to zero. Meanwhile, finding the pressure on Klaus Ludwig now. Bernd Schneider, the double race winner of the first 2 rounds of the championship at Hockenheim.
Here we see Tiemann. He really has been entertaining us all race. He's been trying all sorts of different lines. He just came in too fast there, got on the fire and lost it.
And someone else who's lost it, sadly, Chris Nissen, lost all the gears in the gearbox. And the Audi TT stationary in the pits. They'll be working now to get that car ready for the second of the 2 races. Oh! And a huge amount of late braking there. Bernd Schneider slides his way down from 3rd to 5th position, totally outbrakes himself, and very nearly clobbers the back of Klaus Ludwig's car as he overshoots the hairpin. But he's going again over the bumps now, heading down through the S's at the back of the Stein Tribune. And all this time, Joe Winkelhock is extending his advantage at the head of the field in the Opel Astra, now over 5 seconds ahead of the pursuing pack. And this is the pursuing pack. Klaus Ludwig in the Mercedes-Benz, followed by Manuel Reuter in the Opel Astra. Then the silver Mercedes of Bernd Schneider, Stefano Modena still there in the white Opel Astra. And then a little bit further back now, Marcel Tiemann back up to 6th position. And Joe Winkelhock on to the last lap of the race. Final time through the S's, driving absolutely neatly and perfect. Moved across from the BMW Super Touring operation where he'd been a happy resident for well over a decade. Now he's heading to his first victory for General Motors and the Opel Astra. Meanwhile, it's still a lottery for 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th positions. Ludwig, Reuter, Schneider and Modena battling every inch of the way. But the last lap of the race belongs to this man. Smoking Joe Winkelhock takes the checkered flag and wins round 5 of the German Touring Car Masters as a late charge takes Manuel Reuter to within 0.2 of a second of Klaus Ludwig, but the experience tells, and Volker Streichek, the head of Opel Motorsport, is a very happy man. And how about that proposing the new gull-wing doors on the Opel Astra Coupe, allowing Joe to get a bit of fresh air into the hot interior of that Opel Astra. Meanwhile, Klaus Ludwig cruises in behind, no doubt happy with the points for that 2nd place, because there's still another 40-minute race to go. Delight for the Opel team, and delight for Joe Winkelhock in an instant pack race.
And here we see Schneider making a complete Horlicks of the hairpin here. He overbrakes. In the old days, of course, you had the ABS systems, and that would never have happened.
Well, there, Joe Winkelhock confirmed the winner by 5.8 seconds over Klaus Ludwig. Manuel Reuter 3rd, Bernd Schneider 4th, Michael Bartels 5th, and Marcel Tiemann in 6th. An instant pack race now. Will, do you reckon Tiemann just pushed too hard too soon?
I think what we've seen today is certainly the experienced drivers. Although it's a short circuit with not many corners, experience obviously counts a lot here. And we saw Tiemann really throwing his car around quite a lot and taking some fairly different lines. Here we see this lovely overtaking moves, and Tiemann having his huge heart-stopping moment. I mean, the guys on the pit lane must have been pretty worried as well, seeing a car coming towards them at about 140 miles an hour. But that's exactly, of course, where Dumbreck had his big accident during qualifying. But there's a point as well. Dumbreck and Turner both struggled in this race. Lack of experience, perhaps. Turner finishing 11th and Dumbreck 14th.
Well, with Joe Winkelhock, Klaus Ludwig on the left and Manuel Reuter on the right, celebrating the top 3 places, certainly proof there at least that maybe experience does matter here at the Norisring. And Manuel Reuter now moves into a 2-point lead in the championship ahead of Bernd Schneider, with Joe Winkelhock rocketing up the leaderboard now to 3rd ahead of Marcel Fessler, Timo Schneider and Peter Dumbreck, the young guns 4th, 5th and 6th. But another race to come, another 40 minutes, but now wet weather tyres are the order of the day. Only Pedro Lamy gambling to stay on slick tyres, but the weather report is it's a shower of rain and it may well clear, but it leaves Joe Winkelhock on the front row of the grid with Klaus Ludwig, then Manuel Reuter and Bernd Schneider 3rd and 4th. Michael Bartels, Marcel Tiemann complete row 3, ahead of Thomas Jaeger and Uwe Alpsen, with Pedro Lamy and Stefano Modena completing the top 10. 11th on the grid, Darren Turner. Alongside him is protagonist Timo Schneider from the first race, then Marcel Fessler and Peter Dumbreck. They're followed by Eric Hellery and Christian Menzel, and only one Audi making it onto the starting line. Changeable weather, another great race in prospect.
And the problem here for the drivers is that the pace car really is going quite slowly, but they're trying to weave to get some heat into the tyres and also to scrub and take the shine off perhaps what are new wet tyres for this race.
Well, it's going to be an interesting concept because you can see the track very greasy indeed. The rain's starting to spit and drizzle again. With the windscreen wiper already going on the left of the screen in his black Mercedes-Benz. On his right, Joe Winkelhoff, perhaps two of the most experienced drivers as the lights go to green. And the horsepower is unleashed. All these cars rear-wheel drive. And it's head-to-head between the Opel Astra and the silver Mercedes for third place. Bernd Schneider has the advantage on the brakes. Manuel Reuter having to go the long way into the hairpin. And look behind them, three abreast down the... Oh, and someone's taking a shortcut across the grass. Timo Scheider takes the shortcut. It's four abreast now. Oh, and a spinner as well. Eric Hellery backwards into the Armco, leaves some debris. And Joe Winkelhoff has Klaus Ludwig going door handle to door with him into the S's. But it's Ludwig settling for that second place at the moment. And straight away, Bernd Schneider, you can't afford to relax for a moment with the drivers of this competitiveness, because now Klaus Ludwig has to defend from Bernd Schneider. The cars are twitching and weaving on this very slippery surface. It's smoking Joe Winkelhoff, who's going to head the field out across the start-finish line. But the big question is, who's going to be second? Bernd Schneider gets his nose alongside. Ludwig trying to close the door through the Wissenschacht now. Bernd Schneider's going to try and put the squeeze on him up against the pit wall. This is 100% stuff.
The difference here between the first race and this race, of course, is there isn't a dry line. The whole track is damp, so Ludwig could get the hammer down just like Schneider. But somehow Ludwig's got back ahead of Schneider, but unfortunately he's run wide.
Well, Manuel Reuter trying to take advantage of that battle between the two Mercedes to get the second of the Opel dub. But at the moment, it is still Joe Winkelhoff from Schneider now ahead of Klaus Ludwig. And, well, maybe Ludwig just outbraking himself in these very, very tricky conditions. Still don't forget on relatively cold tyres, because the tyres will cool down rather than heat up. And there we see the first hairpin again. Well, what a melee.
A real battle. There's Altzen, Thiemann and Jaeger, a three-car sandwich, and look at Scheider taking the inside line. That's real rally crossing country, and he's gone from something like 12th to 7th place. A great move. But behind you see another three-car sandwich. This time this one ends in tears. Poor old Darren Turner had Hellery turning in on him, or they were just touching, just a racing incident, and unfortunately outspins Hellery.
Well, round and round Hellery goes. Where he's gone, nobody knows. But at the head of the field, it's Joe Winkelhoff extending his advantage, almost sliding very, very wide again down at the hairpin. The tighter line taken by Schneider, Ludwig and Reuter behind. And Michael Bartels now up into fifth in the next of the Opel Astras, ahead of Uwe Altzen. But looking at the race leader, he's going very, very hard on these soft, compound, wet weather tyres. Is Joe going too hard too soon?
Well, of course, it depends whether the track dries out or whether it could retain some of its dampness and moisture, whether we get a bit more rain. For sure, you've got to look after these tyres. You certainly don't want to slide them. One thing's interesting at this stage in the race is that they're not really going on the pavement. Any painted curves or surfaces, and those pavements are really, really slippery. And it'd be very interesting to see the first man who's really going to get on that pavement.
Well, meanwhile, first man into the pits, Eric Hellery, and there you can see the very sophisticated underbody aerodynamics, which they've made a complete porridge of course, by reversing it into the Armco. But Eric Hellery there, the Opel mechanics, working very, very hard to get the Jägermeister car back out onto the track. And Hellery just sitting calmly in the driver's seat at the moment while that frantic work goes on. Meanwhile, great battles up and down the field. This is Jaeger, Altzen and Fessler, the young Chargers, hassling now over Elderwood. Altzen slithers wide in his Opel Astra, manages to get the power down pretty quick though, and straight through down the inside goes Thomas Jaeger. Oh, and a big bip, and leaning it all over the Armco there, Marcel Fessler. Well, I don't know whether there was contact there with Uwe Altzen, but boy, that was a wild ride.
These barriers, though, can actually help get the car straightened up, because there's no real runoff. It's the track and then the barrier, so provided you don't hit it at too acute an angle, it can actually get you straightened up.
Well, the German drivers have a name for this track. They call it Armco Canal, because it's like the banks of a canal. You bounce off them as if you would with a badly steering narrowboat if you get it wrong. Meanwhile, across the line, Joe Winkelhoff extending his advantage over Bernd Schneider. Klaus Ludwig seems to be settling back into third place. Manuel Reuter fourth, Michael Bartels fifth, and the next of the silver Mercedes of Thomas Jaeger. And Fessler now back ahead of Uwe Altzen, with Stefano Modena dropping back. But the windscreen wipers are now being turned off on a lot of the cars, Will. And I'm going to speculate here, that track is looking like it's drying out.
It certainly is, but not at this part of the circuit because, as you can see, here's Alton running wide on the damp track and Jaeger cutting through on the inside on a much tighter, cleaner line. But as you say, the track is definitely drying out a bit, and the difficulty with this circuit is you can see that there are a lot of different tarmac surfaces, so it can be very difficult judging how dry the circuit actually is because some parts of the tarmac are dark and some are light, and it looks as though it's damp sometimes when it's not, and other times it looks dry and it's actually damp. So it's very difficult for the drivers to judge this and to get it absolutely spot on.
Up to 155 miles an hour down the dual carriageway. Joe Winkelhock still leads Schneider and Ludwig. Then the second of the Opel Astras, Manuel Reuter, still being pursued by his teammate Michael Bartels. So 3 Opels in the top 5, 2 Mercedes-Benz in the top 5, and this man is still piling the pressure on as we see yet more of the dramas down at the hairpin. This time the spinner Timo Scheider and Peter Dumbrecht this time involved with Timo Scheider, and Dumbrecht will not gain any advantage by being held up like that.
Yes, every time there seems to be an incident with these cars, there seems to be a huge amount of carbon fibre flying everywhere. But here you can see an exact example of where the track is partly dry and partly damp, and a real challenge for the drivers as they are, of course, still on wets apart from Lamy, and on a drying or a dry track, wets don't really work very well. What happens is that the blocks on the wet tyre move around too much and overheat, and the tyre really goes off very quickly, and on these rear-wheel drive cars that can be a real problem.
Battle still on between 6th, 7th and 8th places. Jaeger Fessler and Stefano Modena fighting back, having overshot one of the corners in his Opel Astra. Meanwhile, at the head of the field, it's still Winkelhock from Schneider, from Ludwig, from Manuel Reuter. And Bernd Schneider taking it very, very carefully now as he works his way past the back marker, passes Chris Nissen in the sole surviving Audi TT. Chris Nissen suffering with all the other Audis with gearbox problems in the first of the races. They got one of the cars back out on the track. Big disappointment again for the Abt Sportsline team, and not a factory team. They're a privateer team running these Audi TTs in comparison to the factory efforts from Opel and from Mercedes-Benz. And the cars with the body shells made in Great Britain have still got a little bit way to go before they get the fine-tuning, but the Audi TT looks and sounds great.
It's certainly a good-looking car, but as you said, it's a long way behind the development of the Mercedes and Opel teams, and it could take them the whole season before they really catch up and get on a competitive level with them. But they're using all these races as a good test session, and that's what you've got to do. You've got to prove the car in racing conditions, and that's where you're going to make some big steps forward.
And the tarmac really is drying out now. This is Eric Ellery heading into the pits in the Opel Astra. Obviously continuing problems for him, being waved in there by the Opel team. Volker Streichek looking a worried man on the pit lane, keeping a very close eye on the condition. Oh, and the Mercedes are heading into the pits. Fessler and Bernd Schneider. So Schneider out of second place, and this is for a tyre change onto slicks. They've obviously decided they'll lose about 25 seconds. This isn't a Formula 1 tyre stop. You've got to get those big tyres under very narrow wheel arches, and they'll lose about 20 or 25 seconds, but if they can gain that in the second half of the race, they're going to be really making a meal of it.
Yeah, it's a good move to come in early because clearly the track's drying, and you can sometimes find if you get out onto the slicks early and the track's just in the right condition, you'll suddenly find yourself gaining 2 or 3 seconds a lap. It'll be very interesting to see the lap times coming up now.
Well, Schneider absolutely flying. Uwe Halsen's just rejoined from the pits as well in his Opel Astra. So the order currently is Winkelhock, Ludwig, Reuter, Bartels and Jaeger. And Bernd Schneider already setting a fastest lap, 57.282 seconds. That is the equivalent of a qualifying lap.
Already then, a very good lap by Schneider on his slicks as he's following that dry line. That's the one problem you have, of course, is you get onto the damp stuff and you can be flying off the circuit.
Bernd Schneider absolutely flying. The question is who is next going to be coming into the pits. There you see the battle. Winkelhock, Ludwig, Reuters, Bartel, Jaeger, and Joe Winkelhock heads down into the pit lane, and Winkelhock runs wide. Now he's going to have to brake like crazy, almost hits the grass, because you've got to get down to 50 kilometers an hour, 30 miles an hour speed limit in the pits here. And the Opel mechanics are on standby. They are off to the left of our screen. Into the open pit comes Joe Winkelhock. Now this is going to be a very, very important pit stop. And there you can see the difficulty. Much more difficult to put the tyres on than, for example, a Formula One or a single-seater racing car. The big heavy tyres keeps the engine running. Off comes the air jacks, and away goes Smoky Joe Winkelhock again, back out into the pit lane. He's not allowed to do more than 50 kilometres an hour before the end of the pit lane. And now he gets the big push there from the Opel team management, and full throttle back out onto the start-finish straight. And Joe Winkelhock rejoins, and in the meantime, Michael Bartels and Peter Dumbreck are currently in first and second places. Now, Peter Dumbreck is trying to stay out on wet weather tyres, I think, and that really is some performance. Well, there is Michael Bartels. And the question is, where is Peter Dumbreck? How far behind? Because Bartels, I reckon, is heading for the pit lane as well. He goes very high, wide and handsome. So now Peter Dumbreck out of our sight. The Scotsman now leads round 6 of the German Touring Car Masters. But behind him, the rest of the runners on their slick tyres will now be catching up fast. Bernd Schneider, Klaus Ludwig, Joe Winkelhock. There are the men who are currently 3rd and 4th on the road. Ludwig pursuing Joe Winkelhock every inch of the way. Bernd Schneider has come past the pit and been given the P1 signal, so the one, and a big thumbs up there to Joe Winkelhock as well. So where is Peter Dumbreck? It's only a little circuit, you wouldn't think we'd be able to find him somewhere, but Peter Dumbreck's obviously in trouble, and there he is.
Poor old Peter Dumbreck there, just getting on the fire a bit too early, but it does demonstrate that these wet tyres are probably shot to pieces. You looked at Ludwig and Winkelhock getting out of that last corner on their new tyres, and the traction they got was phenomenal.
Well, there they are on those slick tyres, and poor old Peter Dumbreck now heading for the pits, and a set of slicks goes on to Dumbreck's car, but he is already well down the order yet again. And, well, Peter Dumbreck, a brave effort there, trying to stay out in the very, very difficult conditions. Meanwhile, Bernd Schneider, those storming laps after his tyre change, keeping him well ahead of Klaus Ludwig and Joe Winkelhock. Yet more cars visiting the pits. Oh, this should be interesting. Both the Holzer Motorsport cars arrive at once. There aren't enough mechanics to go around. It's a classic case of don't panic. And, well, the mechanics quickly enough on the scene. Half the race still to go for the Holzer Motorsport team and for us. So join us after the break. Welcome back to Nuremberg in Germany, the Norisring, and round 6 of the German Touring Car Masters. And brilliant master strategy from Bernd Schneider in the Mercedes-Benz. An early pit stop to change onto slick, dry weather tyres, and 3 storming laps have now opened out a 14-second advantage over the Mercedes-Benz of Klaus Ludwig. Joe Winkelhock, the initial race leader, 3rd place now in his Opel Astra. He is really going to have to go some to try and close back in on the race leaders. Bernd Schneider, 2 race wins already to his credit, of course, at the Hockenheim. And Will, you said wait for the first time somebody started to use that pavement onto the backstretch. There he goes.
True, but they're not using all of it. You're going to really get committed on there. You run right up against the stone wall, and you should be losing a mirror. And here we see Chris Nissen, a great drive into 5th place, but I guess he must still be on wets.
Nissen, the only driver now on the track who has not stopped to change on to the dry weather tyres. Well, Chris Nissen still going very quickly indeed, but he is now dropping nearly 3 seconds a lap. Oh, and another little bit of panel beating to be done down here. Bartels, Jaeger and Thiemann all contesting the same little bit of tarmac, and Uwe Alpsen and Marcel Fessler there in the 2 black cars taking advantage of that.
Here we can see Jaeger using the 2 cars in front as buffers, because he was definitely on his way to Berlin. He was going far too fast in that corner. And here we see 3 Mercedes having a real smooching session, all making contact, but getting away with it.
Great driving, spectacular racing. Sadly, though, Marcel Thiemann not getting away with it, heading for retirement, deranged steering on his Mercedes CLK. Meanwhile, the black car of Klaus Ludwig now still heading 2 very, very pushy Opel Astras, and it's Joe Winkelhock and Manuel Reuter. Winkelhock the winner of round 5, Manuel Reuter the winner of rounds 3 and 4 of the German Touring Car Masters. And Norbert Haug of Mercedes-Benz has every reason to look a worried man, because his man is trying very hard indeed to stay ahead of these cars. Bernd Schneider, though, is well ahead, lapping now the, well, not even the back markers. This is 10th, 11th and 12th places. Stefan Modena, Timo Scheider and Darren Turner. So really, really pushing the pace. And there you see the gap back. Well, you said see them using all the pavement, Will. There they go.
True professionals, those guys. 3 very experienced pilots, and they're putting on a great race for us here. But it's interesting if you look at the way the cars handle, because I think they're all maybe set up a little bit differently. Reuter looks very strong compared to Winkelhock, and it may be that Winkelhock's running a slightly softer setup to suit the wetter conditions, which we had, of course, at the start of the race.
Certainly Bernd Schneider's the man with the best possible setup at the moment. Ludwig, though, still under pressure, but look at Reuter taking a look down the inside of smoking Joe Winkelhock this time. And Winkelhock keeps the door firmly closed down at the Nuremberg hairpin. Now it's up the backside of the other side of the dual carriageway, and then round the back of the Stein Tribune, the huge monument, the monolith in the middle of this big park, and a huge, huge crowd. Oh, and this time Klaus Ludwig really has to slam the door in the face of Joe Winkelhock, and Winkelhock's lost momentum as a result, and that means he's got Manuel Reuter in the perfect slipstreaming toe position across the line, up from 120 now up to 155 miles an hour down the straight, and at the end you've got a brake, go from 6th down to 1st gear into that 30-mile-an-hour hairpin, and Winkelhock makes the move on Ludwig. Ludwig closes the door on Reuter, and that surely has to be the experience of the veteran.
It was a great move, actually, because Winkelhock actually almost outbraked himself because he knew he was being pushed by Reuter behind him. So he then ended up overtaking Ludwig, but Ludwig, the old fox, obviously saw all this happening in his mirror and placed his car absolutely perfectly and still came out in front. Here we see it again. Ludwig sees Winkelhock coming charging down the inside, takes a wide entry and comes out tight, and then squeezes out Reuter, who has to run up a little bit onto the curb, and then poor old Winkelhock has a real moment as he slithers along the barrier and leaves his signature on the barriers.
A stripe of red on the crash barriers. Meanwhile, though, it's now Reuter versus Ludwig, and I'm just wondering, with that Opel Astra's ability on the brakes, whether Klaus Ludwig can indeed stay in that 2nd place. He jinks one way, and Reuter goes with him. He jinks the other way. Reuter taking a wide line into the hairpin this time. It means he's going to get on the power earlier. Meanwhile, Joe Winkelhock takes the scenic route, almost hits the back of Reuter there, and that last lap was Joe Winkelhock's fastest of the race. Actually some 5 seconds faster than he qualified in pole position in qualifying sessions in the damp, and Joe Winkelhock really just running a little too quick down into the hairpin, having to take that very wide route to avoid hitting the other Opel of Manuel Reuter, and Joe will be not very happy about that. I'm just wondering here, these cars are all on what are supposedly identical Dunlop slick tyres, but I'm just wondering whether some are more identical than others.
That's always a complaint that drivers have, and it's the first thing to blame, but it may well be, as I said earlier, that the setup in the cars is different, because in these damp, wet conditions, drivers will opt, maybe some drivers will opt for a dry setup, hope it's going to dry, others will stay on a wet setup. And here we see Reuter making a lovely move down the inside of Ludwig, but got it all locked up again, almost too much rear braking, and Ludwig gets through back into the front.
Well, this really is a classic game of cat and mouse between 2 great drivers, but all the time this is happening, don't forget, Bernd Schneider is extending his advantage at the head of the field, now over 15 seconds.
The amazing thing about Ludwig is, you think about all the incidents he's been involved in, he really has had a sixth sense. He's got eyes in the back of his head. He's almost known where the cars are going to come charging through and run wide, and he's really driven a very good race.
50 years of age, started racing back in the 1970s, first of all in Ford Escorts and Capris, then moved on to the howling 6-cylinder BMWs, then to Mercedes-Benz, and was a double German touring car champion at the wheel of the 190 Evos. And Klaus Ludwig, well, they don't come any more experienced than this man. And Klaus Ludwig now still with Manuel Reuter, who again is a former multiple touring car champion, mainly for Opel with the turbocharged Opel Calibras, then back in this touring car master series. This, of course, the first season for these new cars, and 2 very, very quick and experienced competitors.
Interesting to watch there, the way that Ludwig's Mercedes is definitely moving around more on the bumps, which almost looks as though it's actually softer than the Opel of Reuter, which may mean, of course, that Reuter is running a harder, drier setup.
In which case it should work in Reuter's favour, because the conditions now drying out. It's still cold though, only 16 degrees Celsius. And this track, normally this July fixture, bakes in 100-degree plus temperatures. But look at Manuel Reuter now, again, right there in the slipstream, letting Ludwig's car make a hole in the air for him. And if he can get a slingshot, he'll get the nose alongside on the brakes. And he's done it this time. In fact, really, I think that Ludwig let him go. Ludwig's one of these guys, always brings a pristine car back. You never see him getting involved in unnecessary contact. And Klaus Ludwig there, well, knew that the Opel Astra was ultimately quicker. And he is going to, I am sure, settle for the points from that third place.
I actually thought Ludwig should have defended that. He really left the door open there, and you have to wonder. Here we see it again. Reuter making a nice clean move. Ludwig not defending at all. And he's certainly a man that you'd want to buy a second-hand racing car off.
Well, I guess that's the reason he's around still as a 50-year-old racing driver as well, but still very quick indeed. Meanwhile, Bernd Schneider now perhaps in cruise mode, and we see the clock on the bottom of our screens down into the last 2 minutes of this race as the clock ticks past 40 minutes from the start, and we see there Klaus Ludwig almost leaning the car on the Armco. He hasn't given up yet, and maybe Ludwig is struggling for traction because the car there just didn't come cleanly out of the hairpin, and he so easily grazed that black paintwork on the wall. But as the clock gets up to the 40 minutes, it's the car, the lead car of Bernd Schneider, when it starts the lap after the 40-minute mark, then they get the 1 lap to go signal, and that will be the last lap of round 6 of the German Touring Car Masters. And at the moment, it is a case of batten down everything and go for it for Manuel Reuter. He hasn't given up yet, and he is still trying to close in that 15-second gap to this man, Bernd Schneider. Stefan Modena behind him in 10th place there has been knocked 1 lap down, and Bernd Schneider is driving this absolutely perfectly.
The key to this race, of course, was an early pit stop, and all the drivers who pitted early really have come through now into the higher positions. So that was clever tactical thinking, in some ways quite obvious, but when you're out there as a driver, it's not always that easy to make those sort of decisions.
Now the question is Bernd Schneider going to close in and lap Peter Dumbreck? Still there, the best of the Brits in 9th position. You can just see him there at the very bottom of our screens. Peter Dumbreck going very well indeed. And I don't think that Bernd Schneider is going to be able to get past him before the checkered flag, so the honour's going to be intact for the Scotsman.
Actually, a very good drive by Dumbreck in the second race. He'd learned from his mistakes perhaps in the first race, and of course he had that in the second race with the tyres. So he's done a good job to come through to 9th place and to finish as top Brit.
And of course, really, Peter Dumbreck and Darren Turner very much the number 2s in their respective teams. So if there's a choice of pit stops, the men like Schneider are going to get that stop first.
True, but they're there as number 2s, and they know that, and they've got a great job being employed by Mercedes. And it's up to them to learn from these experienced guys, and perhaps next year they'll be the number 1 drivers.
Well, of course, both Peter Dumbreck and Darren Turner have been driving all varieties of cars within the Mercedes-Benz empire. Peter Dumbreck, of course, driving the FIA GT Championship cars last year, and the test driver for McLaren F1, Darren Turner, testing the McLaren Formula 1 cars for Hackman Coulthard and driving the 2-seater car on the Adrenaline experience events for McLaren Mercedes-Benz. Meanwhile, now on to the last lap here at the Norisring, round 6 of the German Touring Car Masters. And it is Bernd Schneider going to be taking his 3rd victory from 6 races. Just 1.5 miles. Stefan Modena hanging on to his tail there, 1 lap down in the Opel Astra. Peter Dumbreck still ahead of him as they head through the final corner of the last lap. The long, almost everlasting left-hander taking them onto the start-finish straight, and the checkered flag is ready for Bernd Schneider, winner of round 6 of the Touring Car Masters. And by a huge margin, time for the celebrations to start for Mercedes-Benz before the Opel Astra of Manuel Reuter even comes into sight. He's still pursued across the line by Klaus Ludwig, a gritty race by the veteran German.
Indeed, and a classic race by Schneider made it look very easy, but we've been well entertained by both Reuter and Ludwig, who put on a fantastic scrap. Of course, that was enjoined by Winkelhock earlier on before he had his little trip off the circuit at the hairpin.
Winkelhock crossing the line there in the red Opel Astra in 4th position, but it's this man's day, Bernd Schneider. As Winkelhock wins 1 race, Bernd Schneider wins the other. Honours even still between Opel and Mercedes-Benz. 3 wins each so far from the 6 races in the German Touring Car Masters. But delight, as always, for Bernd Schneider, taking that victory by a very healthy margin. thanks indeed to that very, very clever pit strategy. And I suspect Norbert Haug on the pit wall, the man who's normally there advising Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard, masterminded that tyre change strategy for Bernd Schneider. Klaus Ludwig, another great race for him. Well, there is Norbert Haug, and he no doubt reporting into Stuttgart to say, yes, guys, we got another win. So, Mercedes-Benz take one victory, Opel take the first, but Bernd Schneider by a 14.8-second margin, the winner of round 6 ahead of Manuel Reuter, Klaus Ludwig third, Joe Winkelhock disappointed no doubt with fourth ahead of Michael Bartels and Uwe Alpsen. But Will, a brilliant race and some real highlights.
Yes, this is probably the best. This great move. Comes charging down the inside of Ludwig. Ludwig sees it, tucks back in, comes in wide, tucks back inside, and then pushes Reuter back onto the curb and gets away scot-free. And then here we see Reuter having his first stab at getting past Ludwig. This is the one where he really brakes a little bit too late, has a huge four-wheel slide there, but he's back again. And as for the Brits, well, it was a bit of a disappointing weekend, except, of course, Dum Breck led the race until he spun here on rain tires, but he still managed to finish 9th in the second race, with Darren Turner in 12th.
What about this man? Bernd Schneider heading for 3 wins out of 6 races, a 50% record in the championship so far.
I'm really satisfied because we could not expect, especially after the first one, that we are fighting for winning the second one. And I'm really happy. But we gambled a lot in the second, and that time it's worked out and we won everything. And I'm very happy, and I'm congratulate to the team because this is for sure a victory by the team because this pit stop was amazing.
Well, that pit stop helps Bernd Schneider now extend a slender 3-point lead over Manuel Reuter in the championship. Joe Winkelhock still there in third ahead of Marcel Fessler, Klaus Ludwig and Timo Scheider. But in the manufacturers, it's 3-all. 3 wins for Opel, 3 wins for Mercedes. 3 Mercedes drivers, others in the top 6.
So, Schneider, Reuter, Winkelhock. Names synonymous with the elite of touring car racing over the last 10 years. And with just 6 rounds gone, the cream has certainly risen to the top. Sachsenring, near the Polish border, is next in our exciting series. I hope to see you then.